Howdy, 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 and thank you for joining me here on this Wednesday, September 20th, 2023 for Car Talk with Chad and Poe. And tonight we have a special guest that is someone we've been looking forward to having on the channel for some time. You all know him, and we've all been worried about whether or not he's actually been alive or not, because we know he's being held captive, even though someone keeps claiming he's not. So, but let's go ahead and bring on in our partner as always here on Car Talk. Here comes Clearwater Chad.
Hi, Poe. How you doing?
Pretty soon you aren't going to have any room left.
I know, it keeps growing. Thanks, John S.
My goodness. Yeah, John. So, all right, you ready for tonight, man?
Yep.
We got the one, the only, Duncan Honig joining us.
Right.
Hey, Duncan.
Hello. Evening all. Howdy.
Oh, let's see. Now, are you streaming on your channel as well, your guys' channel, or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Marilyn was wondering if I should put it on hers. I don't actually have mine active yet to a point where I can do anything with it. I'm getting up to that point, but I'm not quite there yet.
Well, next time you come back and join us, or anytime you're in on any other streams that are with StreamYard itself, you'll be able to stream to your own channel as well. So that way that content gets out there as well. So do you have the link to your new channel that you're starting yet, or we still
I don't. Yeah, I haven't got far enough to know how to get that out to anyone. I got to have Marilyn advise me a bit.
Yeah. Chad's real good with it. I know how to. Chad's better at doing the streaming between the two channels than I am. He's done it a whole lot more than I have. So I'm still learning on that one. He figured it out pretty quick. So thank you for being a good sport with us joking around with the wife about whether or not you're alive or not. So
I don't know. It's all entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all just to have fun as well as support the SP movement. So
yeah,
got to have fun while we're doing it,
And it's I'm really surprised this community has just been so welcoming and has been so good to be part of. It's just a lot of really good people out there, and we have a common objective. We want to see folks no longer stuck in these cults that they can't get out of, or they're too afraid to, because they don't know what's going to happen when they get out of them. And I'm sure for you and and I see Babs has jumped in. Did you see what she's got to say there? What did you do to my studio?
That's funny. That's permanent back there, that stuff.
Yeah.
I nailed it all in. Put it in with one-way screws,
I couldn't believe you were using lag bolts. That was crazy. That's
well, I didn't want anything falling down, it'd be embarrassing if it all crashed to the floor. You got to do what you got to do,
And it's amazing. When I was first doing my live streams, I had literally used PVC pipe and made a backdrop, and I had bought things off of Amazon so I could use them as backdrops behind me. And it literally, after it was over with, I'd fold it all up, throw it in the closet, and it'd be back to my regular office. And it's so easy to make it look like it's something more than it is. And just a little bit of time and elbow grease, and you can get it done. So that's good. I'm glad to see you actually touched it up for the He-Man Woman Haters Club there. So I
had to make a man cave out of it. I got an office on the other side of the house, but I've been gathering things up to kind of jazz it up, but it's not quite there. And being that all this equipment is set up and all I got to do is put up some props against some black curtains, that wasn't too bad.
There you go. Yeah. Like with this one, this was spare bedroom. My office was next door, and it was so cramped, and it wasn't really good or conducive for doing the live streams or any kind of YouTubing. And the wife said, "We'll take this spare room, move the bed into here, and I'll take over this." She took it over as her office. So I pretty much had carte blanche. I threw some of the guitars I'd made up on the walls and some other stuff that were important to me. And, literally it's one light that is casting the blue sheen behind me. So really easy. I've got less than, when it comes to light and all that, I've got maybe $60 worth of studio lighting in here that works for me. And it's so you can put it together pretty cheap and pretty easily.
Yeah, you know what's funny about this little studio Marilyn's got is when the boys moved out a little over a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
that left 2 vacant rooms, and the room we're in now is Carter's room.
Oh, wow.
And the boys were into the WWE thing years ago, so one of the rooms, I think Austin, was absolutely bright red.
Oh, wow.
This room was like very dark army green or something. And these rooms were crazy, and they were in kind of rough shape because the boys had lived in them pretty
Oh,
much
yeah.
for a while. So there were holes in the walls that needed to be patched and other things like that, and holes in doors, da 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 da. And so I renovated this room first because it was smaller and it was in worse. Oh, actually, no, I did Austin's room first because it was in better shape and took less work. And I converted that into my office. And then this other room needed a terrific amount of work. So I cleaned it all out and spent, I don't know, it seemed like months kind of working on it here and there. And it became, Marilyn came up with a design. I wish I could pan the whole room with a camera, but I'm not going to take the risk. But anyway, we had a running joke because we fixed it up absolutely beautifully. And we used to joking when we had guests over, we basically got offer them the living room couch or a air mattress on the floor. So we called we had the bed of nails bed and breakfast. So we called it the bed of nails. That was our guest quarters. And then when we got this room done, and it came out absolutely beautifully, Marilyn decorated it with all new stuff, very stylized. But we held on to the name Bed O' Nails. And that way, not too many guests will want to stay here. Well, of course, now it's been taken over, and in a pinch, we can move everything to make it an accommodation. So we've got this beautiful bedroom that's now Marilyn's studio, but it works out pretty well.
How long have you and Marilyn been together?
26 years.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's been a little while.
Yeah, I know how it feels. The wife and I back in June crossed 33 years we've been married and 35 together. So yeah,
nice.
It's amazing. It's hard to imagine your life without your partner. I rarely remember back before. I remember times in the Army and things like that, but the majority of my life has been with this one woman, and it's hard to imagine life without her. So
yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. It's like we have a life. I'm pretty happy. It's a nice life. It's the kids are doing good. They're on their own now, so it's just us in the house. And I'm like, we worked through a lot to get to this point. And you think of all the stuff you've gone through to get to where you are. And, I'm very thankful. I mean, I feel like life's been better to me than I've been to it, pretty much. I can't complain.
And I'm sure you feel the same way I do, that I married way out of my pay grade. So I'm pretty lucky there. So.
Yeah. Well, Marilyn and I met in the cult, and we got married. And oddly enough, I mean, I do believe in certain things like destiny in some areas. And we sort of got married in spite of the cult, against their advice. But yet when it came time to get married, a lot of the people in the cult jumped in to help us. And it was almost like a weird form of vindication where people came together and did the music and did the flowers and helped put everything together. And it just came together very beautifully. And here we are. So
I think our entire wedding, including Chantel's dress, was $200. Everybody brought food. We were able to get we used a community center that we got for free. The minister did it for free. So everything was pretty much paying for her dress and a couple of other things. But, we were just two poor kids that were working 2 and 3 jobs apiece just to make sure we were paying the bills and everything. So, yeah, I know how that is. It was literally, I'd asked her to marry me. My mom, saw it was there, and her family was there. And then next thing you know, 2-3 weeks later, they've already got everything booked out and ready to go. And I'm just like, oh, okay, so let's do this. So few shots of tequila later and I'm married. So
yeah, it's awesome. I mean, we actually did a lot of things, not quite on a shoestring. My folks helped us out. We had a nice wedding reception at the restaurant that my boys actually live over the restaurant now. They have an apartment that's the
okay.
second floor of the restaurant where Austin did his first open mic. My mom, we did her 90th birthday there. We
Mm.
had our wedding reception there. And we did get enough money together from the wedding. We had a fun honeymoon. We burned up a reasonable amount of money and enjoyed it thoroughly. Stayed up kind of in Maine and New Hampshire, and up where we had the cottage. We stayed in a place not too far from the ocean. So, we went over there, did a lot of the traditional fun things that
Oh
we
yeah.
both like to do. So
The wife's been wanting me to take her over to Maine for the lobster season. She really wants to go over there for that. So I think next year will be the trip. I'm trying right now. We're trying to figure things out. I want to have the money. I'd like to take her to Hawaii for Christmas.
Oh, that'd be sweet.
Yeah, the kids, we're empty nesters now too. So the kids, they've got their own apartment together, and it's just her and I. And quite honestly, since they got over the age of 16, Christmas just isn't Christmas like it used to be.
Mm.
And we don't have any grandchildren, so it just doesn't have that feeling like the magic it did when they were children.
Yeah, I
So,
totally get that. Yeah, when they're little, it's all, you get completely into the spirit of it. It's a lot of fun. I mean, now we'll get together and celebrate, but it's definitely not quite the same.
yeah, I mean, you're not having them wake up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, wanting to run down and open their presents up and everything. So, it just the excitement's not there like it used to be. So, I figure instead of worrying about all that and it being, another Christmas morning, the kids here, let's go someplace where we can enjoy it. She can sit on the beach and read, and I can fish, and, just have a nice week away, and let her enjoy someplace that she likes. So
yeah, very cool. Very cool.
I think it'd be nice. So we've been talking about family. One of the things I wanted to jump into, what kind of tool setups do you guys have for working on cars? Chad?
That's a good question. Poe has all the good questions. I'm stalling for time. When I was younger, I started out. Well, I don't think I told you guys, but I have 2 degrees. But I started out my first degree. I got a associates in bodywork, and they used to give us a 55% discount on Mac tools. So I bought a bunch of Mac tools, but I never used them a little bit. So they were, even with the huge discount, they're really expensive. Great tools though. But nowadays I just buy cheaper tools. Unless you're using them every day to work on, wrenching on something. I've had good luck with stores like Harbor Freight and regular stores versus specialty tools.
I was just going to interject something funny, Chad. I was using, when I go to work on cars, I'm not a mechanic, and I'm kind of mechanically handicapped compared to my brother. He's really good and he's got everything. But I was watching a video, and once in a while I get these funny guys doing YouTube videos. A lot of them are sponsored by like Napa or some manufacturer, and they're really professional and everything. And one of them was hilarious because I went to look at doing a ball joint or something on a car, and this guy was like, yeah, and he was swearing away, and which I will hold off on just so we don't get stopped somehow. But anyway, he was like, yeah, and I put this thing in there, and I reefed on this, and bam, and it blew the socket up, and I had to go back, and he was saying, yeah, I bought this at Harbor Freight and that at Harbor Freight, and one by one, he was reefing on a breaker bar with a pipe, and that snapped off. So he ended up, doing some demarketing for Harbor Freight because he broke all of his tools.
Wow.
And he was swearing and everything. It was an absolutely hilarious video. But I'll let you go. I'll let you continue, Chad. I didn't mean to jump in and take over.
Oh, no, I was getting into what you were saying about, I don't know, you guys, you're kind of old school like I am. Like, he probably didn't know what he was doing. You got to be gingerly sometimes, even if it's a big thing. You got to use the breaker bar. You got to use the PV blaster. Sometimes I was, my dad taught me to use the breaker bar, and he taught me, even though you want to take it off, you try to go, if you can't take it off, you tighten it just a little bit, then you untighten it, and you go back and forth, and you got to know a couple of the old school tricks if you want to get some of the stuff done. You can't just manhandle something and expect it to not break.
Right.
Yeah, things will take just so much. In fact, today was funny. I was actually installing a trailer hitch on a little Subaru Forester because I want to get a little camper to pull behind it.
Oh, okay.
And I put up a joke on Facebook. It's ridiculously funny because I ordered this hitch online, right? So it was a couple $100. I'm like, I'll put it in myself. It's not a big deal. Although it's a 2014 Forester my mom had, so it's got very few miles. It's seen a little bit of rust, but it was like the instructions actually had a thing, and it said, professional 30 minutes, novice 60 minutes.
Well, I saw that. Yeah.
Wow.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw that on your Facebook. Yeah.
So it took me, because I had to, there's a heat shield that basically had fallen off when I lowered the exhaust. To get all those things loose took a while. So the total job took me over 3 hours. So I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is the last time I tried to do a job based on a YouTube video. This wasn't based on a video. It was based on instructions. Seemed pretty basic. But I watched a YouTube video and a guy did a job. I think we were switching out a half shaft or something. In the video, it took the guy about 17 minutes all told to get this job done. And it took 3 guys about 6 hours to do that job because we had to use presses, torches. I mean, I don't know where these guys get these vehicles that are like have 1 mile on them. They've never seen weather, and everything was lubricated with never sees or something. So it just comes apart. We had to fight to the death to get that car apart to fix that. So
there was there's a guy I know who lives not too far from here, and he was telling me about some of those videos that you see those guys doing, and literally they have someone who goes in and does the job and resets everything, but leaves everything nice and loose so that they don't have to go in there and put heat
brilliant.
or black.
So that's the second take, right? The first take is 17 hours, and the second one is 45 minutes because everything's loose.
Yeah, with not even the same person doing it,
well, it's like one guy I know who does woodworking videos on YouTube, and you see him using the hand planers and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
When I went to his shop, he's got over $1 million worth of equipment in there, and you see him doing the hand planing, and then you see, it cuts to a clip where the piece is perfectly straight and it looks beautiful. Well, what he does is he does a couple rounds with a hand planer so you can see it on video, then throws it into his $10,000 24-inch planer.
Yeah,
and gets it all taken care of there. And that's it, to me, that's crazy. Talking about Harbor Freight, Chad and I were talking earlier about this stuff. I have a Harbor Freight 220 volt MIG welder. It's a wire feed with argon. I've had Miller, ESAB. I've had some really nice welders, and I've had them last me. I had an ESAB. It was $7,000. Lasted 6 months before the motherboard burnout. And then when I tried to do something about it, ESAB's like, "Well, you're out of your warranty anyway." So my Harbor Freight welder I've had over 12 years now. Now it won't throw down the consistency of that Miller or the ESABs that I've had. But if I'm not doing work that requires inspection by people or things like that, it throws down just as solid a weld as the ESAB or the Miller does. And it's lasted me, 12 years now. And it cost me $240 when I bought it, as compared to a $7,000 welder that burnt out in 6 months. So,
yeah, it's such a crapshoot buying from them, because my brother's like, it's funny. We used to carry around, because we did construction work together for many years. And he had this big Bosch double tank compressor that we used to carry on. That thing weighed about 200 pounds.
Wow.
And it worked well, but then we got tired of carrying that thing around. We were getting older. We're like, this is getting ridiculous. You truck that up a few flights of stairs. He got this thing from like Harbor Freight or someplace, and it was about $38. This little compressor. It's still running.
Pancake?
It wasn't even a pancake. It was a really small dual tank type one.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I've had those. Yep.
And the thing is still going. I think at one point, he's had to do a little work on that thing, but it's lightweight. You can grab it with one hand, haul it up flights of stairs. You use it all day long. I'm like, this thing is great for the money. It's ridiculous. And, I've got a couple pump jack type things that I grabbed probably Harbor Freight out of the back of a truck someplace. And they were cheap, but they still work. I mean, I use them once in a while. I've never had a problem with them. I'm like, well, this is where it's you never know what you're going to get. Some of the things will last for years. It's actually well made. Some of it's crap, but you don't really know.
I've got like the Harbor Freight hydraulic press, and it's like an arbor press almost. And it's one of the ones where it's got the pump handle, bottle jack on it, and all that. And this thing has lasted. It's probably 8-9 years I've had it now. And the crazy thing is that a buddy of mine bought one off of one of the bigger name companies. His cost like $1,000. Mine cost $100. And his is completely rusted over now. It works half the time, the other half it doesn't. Mine looks, and I beat the daylights out of it, but it still looks like it did the day I bought it. It's just dirtier. And a lot of people, like you were saying, sometimes it's a crapshoot on it, but I've had such good luck with Harbor Freight stuff. It's just not even funny. All their tools have lasted me. And, like I've got my dad, he had money. So he always bought Craftsman tools. That was all he would ever have. And, I've still got a good selection of his tools. But the problem is now you can't return them. Used to be you could take your Craftsman tools back if they broke and they would give you a free replacement. Now, where do you go to do that? And, so now I've got these tools that are collecting that are just worthless now. Used to be, I wish 10 years ago, I'd thrown them all out in a yard sale. I probably could have got good money for them because a lot of people go around to the yard sales looking for those old Craftsman wrenches and stuff like that. They turn around and take them right back to the Craftsman store and get a brand new one saying it's broke. And nowadays you can't even do that. So,
Yeah, what's funny is my dad gave me a set of Craftsman tools that I still use to the day. And this was probably, I was 15 or 16. He got me a really nice big mechanic set and a big toolbox. And that's been my main set right up until today. This has been about probably 45 years.
Wow.
And I've lost and had to replace just a handful of sockets and things. Those are tough tools. I don't think I've broken anything. And
the Craftsmen they're good quality, but the problem is, like I said, it's if they break, you're kind of screwed nowadays. You can't get a replacement for them. Now that all the Sears are gone. So,
Poe, do you have a Lowe's next year? Because Lowe's took over.
Did they take over Craftsman?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they warranty them, but I seen Craftsman at Lowe's.
I know that like Craftsman still is a brand on its own. It's the only thing from Sears that's still running, but I didn't know where you could find them.
Yeah, I don't know if they warranty them or not, but I've seen at least the ones in Buffalo here.
Now I don't know if you guys have them there or not. We have Menards here.
Nope.
And they're like a Home Depot, a Lowe's, but instead of like Home Depot and Lowe's, which are big corporate entities, Menards is privately owned. They're not shareholder owned or anything like that. So it's a bit of a difference in the way that they handle everything. Plus they give back these rebates and they say, well, the rebate expires on this time or that time, but we've sent them in a year later and they've still honored them. Wow. So you're not only getting good prices on it from a company that's not a big corporate shareholder thing, but on top of it, they honor their rebates long after they're expired. So we're very happy to deal with them. I don't even go to Home Depot anymore.
Nice.
Yeah, I see Joel chimed in and says Craftsman is now owned by Black & Decker.
Oh, okay.
Kind of makes sense. I knew they were still, there's still tools under that name, so I wasn't sure.
Okay.
But I'll tell you another little funny blurb. My first job out of high school, because I didn't know if I was going to go to college. My folks were all gung-ho about it, and I'm like, geez, I don't know. I didn't have it clear in my head what I'd even study if I went, so I took a year off. But my first job was working at a Sears Roebuck in Pittsfield, Mass. And I started out in receiving, and then after a certain amount of time, I ended up working in hardware and selling the saws, the big old radial arm saws and all that kind of stuff. But people would come in with their broken Craftsman screwdrivers and different saws and tools. So I saw a lot of those things come in, and they did honor the warranty. We had boxes we'd send back.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously abused tools that were broken off and screwdrivers that were rounded off and every other thing. People knew that they could get them replaced. So we would honor that back. Of course, that was back in the late 70s. That was quite a while ago. But yeah, that was back when there was actual stores you could go into and pick out your tools.
I've got a friend. He's got a lot of his old tools, like his screwdrivers and his chisels and things like that. They're 50, 60 years old. And like if a screwdriver, if a flathead screwdriver breaks the end off of it, he'll literally take it over, throw it up, get the welder out and re-weld the tip of it, and then sit there and grind it down and heat treat it and go right back to using it. And, I was like, it'd be cheaper just to go ahead and buy a new set. And he goes, this one works just fine for me. Why do I need to try something else? I'm not, I'm like, I ain't gonna argue with you about it, but I was just trying to give you a little bit of help there, buddy. I've been real fortunate with doing the monster truck stuff all these years, like I have and everything. I've got to learn how to work with a lot of different tool setups, and I got to a point where with the big monster trucks, you have to be able to, some of the tools that we would use on them are thousands and thousands of dollars, and you could literally make your own for a couple $100 with scrap iron and things like that. So that's what got me into actually making my own tools and my own setups and my own jigs, is, out of necessity, because, when you're touring a monster truck and, you're making enough to live off of, you're not going to get rich doing it unless you're getting into the really big leagues there. And so you're making decent money and everything, but you can't afford the weekly expenses of having to buy new tools and everything. So you have to learn how to start making your own. And that's what got me into all that, was watching this guy, how he would refurbish all this stuff. And, like we have certain things, like just the nut on the top of a nut on the top of one of the nitrogen shock absorbers we use nowadays are like 5.5 inches. And, think about trying to buy a wrench that's going to turn something like that. Whereas, hey, I've got some angle iron, I've got some plate, I've got some flat. Okay, I can make my own tool right here and not worry about it. And so that's, where all that came from for me. And watching the other guys doing stuff like that as well, it really helped out. So you do a lot of that there, Duncan, with your stuff, or?
Honestly, I try to avoid getting into anything that requires equipment I don't have, and if I do, I call my brother. And
there you go.
So he's really good. He loves, like, he's a little different than me. He loves working on, like, I'll work on cars if I have to, and if it's something that's out of my wheelhouse, I'll either call him in or I'll go to a mechanic. I always like to have one or two mechanics I know that I can take things to, and if I lock onto a guy that's really good and not too overpriced, I'll stay with him as long as I can.
Oh yeah.
But my brother Al has gotten pretty extreme, so he'll take on, like right now he's ordered a new truck, but he's giving his existing truck to Austin. It's like a Silverado. He's got a lot of miles, like 200,000 miles on it, but it's got a new transmission and a whole bunch of, he'll go over vehicles and do everything. So they were just working, he and Austin were working on the front end, doing the ball joints and all the steering gear and everything. He's got presses and ball joint forks and,
that's nice.
Torches and everything. So he's equipped. I'm not really equipped to do things. I mean, I'll do brakes and oil changes and exhaust work and I've done a number of things, but I don't enjoy it the way he does. He sees it as a challenge.
Oh yeah.
And he just gets into it. Whereas I'll do it because I have to, but it's not what I would choose to do generally.
For me, I love it. Anything that is a challenge, like you said, I like getting into it and learning how to do things. And Marjan brings up a good point. I think, everybody's so used to just throwing things away nowadays.
Yeah.
And, I've told the story, I don't know how many times Chad's heard it, where, my daughter was, we were out front looking at her car and her friends were there and they had no idea what we were doing. And she was checking her oil, her transmission fluid, her power steering fluid, brake fluid, and all that. And her friends are just like, how do you know all that? And she's like, well, my dad taught me. So, talking to him, I said, well, let's set up a day and you guys all come over here, bring your cars. I'm going to teach you how to do all this yourselves. I'm going to teach you how to change your own oil, and I'm going to teach you how to change a flat tire. And so the day came, they all showed up with their cars. But what killed me was how many fathers showed up with the daughters because they didn't know how to do it. And I think it's just a real a mirror of what is going on in society nowadays. These kids have no practical application abilities whatsoever. They know how to use these things right here. They know how to use them real good, but they don't know how to do anything else. And you'd
Yeah, I
figure,
hate to have to agree with you, but I basically do, because unless somebody takes the time to teach them and train them
right,
and show them how to do stuff, how are they going to learn? Like, I'm thankful for YouTube videos because you can find
right,
out how to do it and watch somebody else do it. So for a while, nobody could even do that. Now that you can do that, if you've got a little gumption, you can buy tools and
oh
figure
yeah,
out how to do things. But it's not a thing like in the old days when you could work on cars. My dad, I mean, he'd do body work. He'd keep the cars going for 20 years. That was about the minimum, If
oh
you
yeah.
couldn't keep a car going at least 20 years, you were a loser. You failed.
Well,
And
talking about trucks, I had a 2004 F-250. It had the 6.0 diesel in it. So I took out the EGR, which is the exhaust gas return. And Ford had some crazy idea of using the exhaust gas and pumping it back through. And I don't even know what the full scope of it was, but it was killing the motors. They were basically eating themselves alive. So they learned that if you take the EGR setup off of it and put a bypass on there, then suddenly these trucks were actually running good. So, went in, took all that off. And while I was in there, I put a coolant filtration system in and a 4-inch exhaust with no muffler straight back from the turbo. And when I sold that truck, it had almost 500,000 miles on it.
yeah, that's
And
crazy.
the kid who's got it now, I just saw him the other day. He's well over 700,000 miles on that truck. And it's still going strong. It's starting to rust out, but you guys probably see that up there in Vermont and New York as well, because they don't know how to actually handle snow. They throw salt down on everything and it just eats the bodies away. But
Yes,
yeah,
does.
and the kid absolutely loves it. It's big 4-wheel drive F-250. It's strong as an ox. It's the one that still had the leaf springs on the front and rear of it before they went over to the coils and all that. Has the straight axle in the front, which most of them nowadays are the independent front suspension setup. And that thing, he said to this day, he's still, I went from 7 to 10 miles to the gallon on it. When I did all that stuff to it, I went up to 15 and 18 on miles per gallon on diesel with that truck. And he said to this day, it's still doing it. And he'll take it down the highway 80 miles an hour all day long. So, it's amazing. This kid's willing to work on it. I learned over the years, I was fortunate. I had a father who, even though he was an ass and a brutal man, he taught me a lot of things. And one of the things he taught me is never turn down the opportunity to learn how to do something that can help you out in life. So any chance I've had where I saw people working on stuff, I'd stop and ask them how they were doing it. If they could show me how they're doing it, learn how to work on cars, learn how to work on, pretty much anything I needed. And it's really helped me out. So
Totally.
it's nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad. Like Al's been a good mentor to the boys to teach them, if they're interested in knowing how to work on mechanical things. I mean, I'm a carpenter. I was. I mean, I do real estate. I do some carpentry, but a lot less than I used to. But my passion was working with wood. I love wood. It's beautiful. I love antiques, and I always liked building things out of wood.
Oh yeah.
And the last year or so, I've slowed up because I've gotten caught up in so many other things. But that's always been my passion. Like I really enjoy doing that, and it's
I
more
have 3
forgiving than working with
slabs.
metal. But
I have 3 slabs from a maple they cut down in the backyard, and they're about 3 inches thick. They are, one is 28, one is 32, and the other one is 36 inches across. And I'm going to take those. I'm planing them down. I'm going to, one of them has a huge crack from where it's seasoned. So I'm going to go ahead and use my hydraulic pullers and go ahead and snap it so it's 2 pieces, and then fill in the channel with resin, and then cover all of them in resin, make tables out of them. That's the kind of stuff, you just don't see kids doing stuff like that anymore. If, when I was a kid, if we didn't have something, we learned how to make something that was similar that worked for us. These kids nowadays, everything's in a digital world, so they don't even worry about it anymore.
yeah, it's kind of too bad. I mean, if things ever do change where we lose access to the internet or any of these things, I mean, I'm like, we're all in terrible trouble. So even now up here, I try to think of myself as being prepared and independent a little bit, but the power goes out. Next thing you know, you're where's this? Where's that? Time to dig out the generator. Then we got to figure out where the lantern and the stove and the coffee maker and all these things we can use are. And just being out of communication, we're used to being able to contact anyone in the world at any time, night or day, get all the information we need about anything. I mean, every time I always believe in keep on learning, like always learning is, you have a thought like, oh, what does that word mean? I don't really Google it instantly. Yeah. 5 seconds later, you know what the word means.
The origin, all that. Yeah.
Yeah. You need something, you just sit down and order it. Bam,
And we've lost so many of the skills and traditions that we used to have. My grandfather, he taught me, how to hunt. He taught me how to survive off the land, and it's just amazing. Well, my father did a lot with the hunting as well. But, a lot of these kids, unless they grow up in rural areas, they don't know how to fish. They don't know how to hunt. They don't know how to preserve things. I mean, one of the things is a friend of ours, we don't do canning anymore because we don't have the time to do it. But one of my wife's friends, she just finished a week long of canning tomatoes, potatoes, pretty much any kind of vegetable or fruit that you could think of. She's got them all canned, got them all set down in her cellar, and she's good for the next year. But these nowadays, like you said, if something happens, we lose the internet, we lose the electricity and stuff like that. These folks nowadays, they're making a run on the Dollar General just so they can buy every packet of toilet paper.
That's the thing. Everything disappears from the stores. That's why, like, Marilyn kind of laughs at me and mocks me a little bit. But I mean, if I don't have at least 2 or 3 weeks worth of food in my stash, I'm not ready, because you don't know what can happen. There's so much stuff that can happen. And with the weather disasters we've had and everything else, I'm like, no, I'd rather have the peace of mind knowing, like, okay, like we have a gravity-fed spring up on a hill, the best, purest spring water that I've ever tasted, I think, and we're spoiled by having that. But if power goes out, we got water. I had to upgrade our septic years ago because it failed. It used to be a gravity system.
Oh, okay.
So now it's a pump system. So if I get a jam, but I do have a generator to back it up. So if I get in a bind, I can run enough things off the generator to get by. But I mean, I always try to make sure I got enough stuff to ride out a few weeks, because like during COVID, early COVID, it was ridiculous. You couldn't buy a roll of toilet paper. Yeah. I mean, that's a joke, that's funny, except when you're sitting in the bathroom and you don't have any toilet paper. It's not funny anymore.
Where's that newspaper? We're headed in here.
Yeah, give me that Sears catalog,
Yeah. What kind of biologics do you use in your septic system?
It's a pump system, and it's got a filter in between the effluent tank and the main tank.
Okay.
And I made a terrible mistake after we first had it installed, because I didn't really think about the fact they'd say, have it pumped every 2 or 3 years. That seemed kind of frequent. So I let a couple of years go by, and at one point, I won't go into the ugly details, but that the whole system backed up and clogged. I'd let it go 7 years. I didn't realize that filter clogged up and everything backed up into the house. By the time it shut down and I got a truck to the house, it was a disaster.
Oh, I bet.
And it was a very ugly process of clearing it so it would work again, which I did. Now it's like I have it scheduled in a couple of weeks to get it pumped again. I had it done a couple of years ago, but I'm like, I'm not risking that catastrophe again. But
I can remember the first time I saw it. My grandfather, I was riding with my grandfather, and he stopped, got out of the car, threw a pair of gloves on, bent over and picked up a dead raccoon out of the road, threw it in a bag in the trunk of the car, and got back in. I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm going to throw it in the septic tank." And I said, "Why?" He said, "The bacteria off of that raccoon that's dead will help clean my entire septic system out." And I got home and I was talking to Dad about it. And he goes, "Oh yeah." He goes, I throw roadkill in every year. I throw one in. He goes, "We've never had our septic system back up." And a good friend of mine, now we're on city sewage here, but a good friend of mine right down the road, he's on a septic system, and they've been in their house 30 some years, and they've never had to have their septic tank cleaned out. And every year he does the same thing. He grabs a roadkill, throws it in the septic tank, and all that bacteria in there eats it all out.
So, yeah, amazing. I never heard of that. That's a pretty thing. I don't know if Marilyn would go for that, but I used to use Rid-X. I'd throw Rid-X down the toilet every so often. You get a box of it, and every month you throw a thing of it in. Then I kind of ran out of it and stopped doing it. But now I'm like, okay, I've got a filter in there, so I definitely have to get it pumped every so often. And of course, now with 2 of us here, it'll probably go longer. With
Oh,
4
yeah.
of us here, yeah.
Especially teenagers, my gosh. And boy, do they flush everything. But Joel was telling me he had a vintage tractor like I do, and he was trying to find parts for it. And I sent him over to a group here in Michigan, Steiner Tractors, and pretty much any vintage tractor that's out there, they have parts for. You can pretty much rebuild the entire tractor right from their catalog, and they are just the nicest people. I've got a 1941 Ford 9N tractor, and all the parts that I get for it, I go right through Steiner's for it because they're just that good of people. And like I said, I can rebuild my entire tractor right from their showroom floor, and they're about an hour and a half north of me. So it's pretty good stuff there. You know, another thing you don't see much of nowadays.
No, when you hear about all the nonsense with John Deere and these companies, or you can't work on the stuff yourself, I'm like, buy an old one. I mean, there's people like there's a back road near me where the guy's got a whole run of old tractors in his yard. I'm like, man, all you got to do is buy an old one, resurrect it, and take care of it yourself, and get the parts, and you don't owe anybody else anything. You're not committed to these guys.
It doesn't have Bluetooth, and it doesn't have air conditioning, and I just can't go if I don't have a cell phone holder in my
bummer, man.
combine.
Life's rough, isn't it?
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
The same guy I was telling you about that they've run their septic system with putting roadkill in it. He owns an excavating company, and they also sell landscaping supplies, and they're pretty good, pretty big business. And he won't buy a new tractor or a piece of equipment, a loader or anything like that. Everything he buys is older. And he and I were talking about it, and he said, well, I can get parts for these. They're half the price of the new tractors. And I don't have to worry about if I go to change the oil on it, it's going to void my warranty on a $500,000 piece of equipment.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's that's one of the things that's something I'm going to be doing a lot more coverage on, is the fact of all these companies trying to get away from the right to repair and forcing you to use them. It's just
I hate that. That to me is another thing that should be against the law. That's terrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, what was your favorite celebrity car? Like we know what Chad is. He loves Kit.
Yeah.
So, what was yours?
Actually, I like the black Trans Am with the Golden Eagle on it. That was.
Oh, the Smokey and the Bandit car.
Smokey
and the Bandit. Yeah, that's the car I wanted when that movie came out. I'm like,
that's a great
never
car.
ended up with one. That was beautiful.
Roscoe. I don't know if you can hear him or not. He's going.
I can. I was wondering if that was one of my critters.
Probably a leaf fell off the tree. Knowing this dog, he's nuttier than a fruitcake sometimes. Anything that moves, he's going nuts trying to get at it. And he thinks he weighs about 250 pounds. He thinks he's just the biggest dog on the block. Our neighbor's got 2 real big shepherds, and he just runs right up to him and just stands nose to nose with him like, you ain't nothing. I'm the king of this place.
Nice.
It's hilarious how he is. Lady down the road's got a what do you call him? Newfoundland.
Oh yeah, they're big.
Dog's pushing almost 200 pounds. It's a monster. And he runs right up to it, stares it right down. He's not afraid of anything. So, of course, that does give me problems when the coyotes try to get in the yard, because he's the kind that he'll want to go out and fight them. So, that's always fun. That, and then he likes to bark at anything that flies. So I'll hear him out back, and he'll be barking. I'll look, and he's looking straight up. I'll go out in the backyard, and there's a bald eagle perched up in a tree just staring at him. I'm like, oh, come on. He's not afraid of any of it. Let's see.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm noticing a few comments by Marjan USA and about Toyotas. And I was just going to say, I agree with you about the Toyotas. You've got a older Corolla. Like, those will go forever. We have Austin sort of inherited a Toyota van that my mom had, and then I ended up with it, and I worked out of it for a while, and then we handed it off to Austin for his band vehicle, and that will probably just keep on going. Those are so well made. And then Marilyn's newer car is a RAV4 that I got from one of my old customers whose husband had passed away suddenly during the summer. And she put it up on Facebook. She was looking to get rid of the car. And I said, wait a minute, tell me more about it. And it had about 45,000 miles on it, a 2017. I'm like, how much do you want? And I just grabbed it because these Toyotas are, well,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're made to go forever. They definitely are one of the reliability brands that kind of Honda and Toyota are so good.
I had a 79 Toyota truck. They didn't even have a name. It was just truck. And it was one of those, some guy had it, messed it up bad, jacking it up and everything. I got it for like pennies on the dollar. And I brought it home and I did a good lift on it and everything like that. I had 44-inch groundhogs on that thing with that little 4-cylinder engine. And I could spin all 4 tires in first gear on that thing. It would turn those massive 44-inch tires. And it was, man, that thing, you couldn't get it stuck. Not for anything in the world. That thing, you'd bury it right to the frame. It would dig its way out. And I've never had another truck that ran as good as that or handled as well. The only problem for me with it was the frame rotted and literally broken too. I had to go in there and fix the frame and get it back to straight and still working. But I ended up selling it after that point because it got to the point where I was just spending too much money just trying to keep the thing running anymore. But that was also my fault for beating the daylights out of it on a daily basis too. So have you heard of the Japanese K trucks?
No.
That's something I'm looking at getting. Is I'm trying to find one that's a decent price. Here's what they look like.
It's a nice little truck.
It has probably the same wheelbase as like a Chevy Malibu or Impala, the new ones, not the old 70s. But it's a short wheelbase. Almost all of them are 4-wheel drive. You can get them. The problem with them is that you can't get them licensed in most states because they don't have enough power to go on the highway. Most they'll do is about 45 miles an hour. So I found a guy out of Illinois that I've been watching some of his stuff. He's taking these and he's putting engines out of like Honda Gold Wings into these things. And they'll do highway speeds. And the guy's getting like 50 miles to the gallon out of these things. And so if I can find one at the right price, I know where there's a couple of Honda Gold Wings that they were wrecked or whatever, but the engine and everything's still good in them. That's one of the next projects I'd like to do is take one of those and put one of those motors in it and keep that as my personal little truck. So
nice.
They're something else. You see them all over in Japan and all over Southeast Asia. They're tiny. They have the little small roads back there, and with them being 4-wheel drive, you can use them for a farm truck or whatever. And they don't cost much to. Let's see. That's a good one. How do you import from another country to the United States? Have any of you guys had any dealings with that kind of stuff?
No.
I know people have rented space on containers, sent them over in container ships to get things around.
The problem is that they have to be, when you get them over here, they have to meet so many conditions. And a lot of times the states won't allow the titles that come with them. So you have to you use that title and they'll basically be given like an assembled title or something like that. And many of them don't have like the DOT. They don't match the DOT standards we have here. So you get in a situation where you can't, your insurance is crazy on them, your registration's crazy on them and all that. It's like those Volkswagen Beetles that you can buy out of Mexico for like $1,000 that look just like the 1950s Bugs. Wow. But the problem is that it takes so much to get them roadworthy that it's not worth the price of doing it. Goldie, Karen contacted me on this. We are going to have to reschedule. She had something important that happened, and I'm going to be making the announcement on Facebook with it. But yeah, Karen's not going to be able to join me tomorrow night, so we have to reschedule due to something she's got going on. And it's pretty good reason that she can't join me. But yeah, I just I literally got home, got a bunch of stuff done, and then jumped on here. So I haven't had a chance to notify anybody. Yeah, Joel's right on that. Importing a car from another country can be a complete nightmare.
I've seen not a lot. I've seen one at a dealership, and not that I was going to buy it, but considering it, the one thing that said I'm not buying this car is because, of course, the steering wheel's on the wrong side, and I just couldn't physically
the right hand drive.
Yeah, it'd be odd to drive that. It just throw me off.
Well, you want to talk about fun? Get to Japan, Thailand, those countries, and not only are you now driving on the right hand side of the car, you're on the exact opposite side of the road as you were.
Yeah,
and
I couldn't do it.
Like for me, here it is. I spent 3 months in Malaysia at the beginning of the year, Malaysia and Cambodia and Vietnam, and driving that way there. Then coming back to the United States, and suddenly I'm back in left-hand side and on the what would be considered the proper side of the road. Talk about just completely messing your brain up.
I barely know what side of the road I'm driving on to begin with, Poe. Am I right?
Oh yeah. So that's as many times you've been arrested. What can we say? But I think a little bit of that going on there too.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like with so many people go to the government auctions and they want to buy the old Humvees from the military. They buy them, they ship them home, and then they find out you can't title them because of the government titling on them, the governors that are on them. They don't have a lot of the things like the DOT requirements. And now they're stuck with this thing. They're like, I paid $15,000 for this, and if this was an actual H1 Hummer, it'd be $100,000. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, that's why it went so cheap. So yeah, that's one of the fun ones. There we go. I have a friend who has one of those little trucks. He uses it on his ranch. It is gutless, but it works hard, just slow. Yeah, that's the thing. And they're like with the old Toyotas, like the Toyota pickup that I had. Those things, they're slow, but man, do those things, they just won't stop digging. Yeah. And they're great little things. Let's see here. With these emissions inspections in Pennsylvania could make it difficult. Yeah, I don't, that's something I don't, they got them up there in Vermont and in New York.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe you guys don't have them. You mentioned that on a previous show. Yeah, you can't have a service light on in your car, and they hook right up to your
they plug right into it. Yeah,
it goes right to the state. Yeah, you can't.
Yeah. See, they had that in Ohio, but as far as I know, they've never had it here in Michigan. But they got rid of it in Ohio because everybody's like, if the car's older than 15 years old, it doesn't have to have the emissions testing, or I forget what age it is. So that automatically eliminates the car from having to go through it. So everybody's like, wait a minute, the cars that should have to have emissions testing are therefore invalidated by state law. But my car that is within 5 years of age, you're making me pay for these testing, and then anything that you don't like, I have to pay to fix. So the people got together and they voted it out. And that's been pretty good. So I don't know.
It kind of makes sense to me. Like the newer vehicles, they're going to pass unless something does screw up. Yeah. But the older ones, like the van, and I had an old Blazer that Carter had for a while, they were exempt because they were so old.
Yeah.
They were more than 20 years old or 15 or whatever. So basically you just slap a sticker on there. But the newer ones, you got to plug them in and all the rest of it. But if they're new, they're probably going to fly right through. You don't even need to test them. Why bother? They're new, or they're less than, say, 5 years old.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I have friends that in the monster truck industry, they travel all over the country, but won't go to California. They have very good equipment. It meets pretty much all the emission standards, but because of the age and the model of the vehicles, California won't let them enter the state. So they're just like, I just won't do shows there anymore. And, it's not hurting them any. And it's pretty much now in California, it's all folks that live in California are doing the shows there, because most of them that are trying to come in from out of state, if your vehicle isn't 1 or 2 years old, they're not letting you in, or they're giving you a bunch of tickets for emissions violations and things like that. And, you know, when you've got a $500,000 setup with your tractor and your trailer and everything, it's, you know, it gets to be a bit of a pain in the butt trying to work with these states. Do either of you have any idea why they started driving on the other side of the road?
Mhm.
You know, in those other countries like the UK and that? I have no idea. You know, I've never even thought about it. Let me look it up. There we go.
Good question.
Let's see here. It says it's possible that the custom driving on a left dates back to prehistory and may later have been used as an early road safety measure. That makes sense. You know, I mean, if you ever see anything out of Europe nowadays, they're the ones who are now everybody who drives a tow truck, drives any kind of commercial truck has to wear, you know, the bright reflective vests and all that stuff. And they've got our insurance companies requiring everybody to meet these qualifications. They've always been about making things easier and better on the, you know, on the workers and stuff. But, you know, it's crazy. I mean, they were talking about with the police department when I first retired from River Rouge, they were starting to come out with the reflective vests that the officers had to wear on traffic stops and things like that. And I see some of them are going away from it, or they're starting to get the reflective paneling in like their jackets and things like that. But there was so much kickback. They're all like, we aren't from Britain. I'm not wearing that crap. The insurance company's like, yes, you are. And they're like, nah. And they finally beat the insurance companies back down to the point where the guys didn't have to have it anymore. But, you know, it's amazing over there. They have so many qualifiers that you have to meet, so many boxes you have to check just to work for a living. It's crazy stuff. Let's see, looking at these. Okay, we're good. We're caught up. Duncan, what is the most expensive tool you own?
Mechanically? Good question. I don't really have any really I don't have welders. I don't have really expensive gear. I mean, most of my the gear I invest in is carpentry gear, but I don't have anything super expensive that way. I still work with contractors' saws and tools that are maybe $300-400. Right. I didn't mechanic wise. I mean, I've got a couple of big trays of sockets and breaker bars and tools.
But yeah, try replacing those and see how much that costs you.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, if you added up all the tools I do have, there's, you know, definitely a few $100s worth of mechanical tools. But it never, like Al went big, and he's got like big presses and, you know, welders and arc welders and the whole business, because he's gone at it in a bigger way than me. So for me, it was mostly carpentry, but I never had a big shop where I could get like real shop tools. So most of the work I've done is, you know, tools that I could just throw in the back of a truck or a car and haul around. So I didn't have big, heavy table saws. I've done most of all my work with fairly light, small equipment like that.
Plus, if you got a friend or family member that you can get to pretty quickly that has all those tools, why buy them yourself?
Exactly. Yeah. If I have a real big project, I'll call Al in on it, and he'll jump in with, he'll come up with his truck and all of his stuff, and we'll go at it. So.
And that's you know, that's the thing. I mean, like for me, if it's too big for any of the stuff that I've got, I just go down to my buddy who owns the excavating company. He's got the stuff in his shop that we can use. And you know, I don't have lifts. I use ramps and then jack stands if I need to get a vehicle up. But you know, if I've got to lift the entire car and get up underneath of it to do something, then I just take it down to his shop and throw it on his lift. You know, plus he's got, like, if I need to do tube bending, if I'm building a cage or working on a chassis for a monster truck, he's got an old hearth exhaust bending set up in there that I can go and take it all down and throw it on there. And, you know, just takes a minute or two to bend it all out to what I need. So it gets ridiculous. What about you, Chad?
Sorry to interrupt. Oh, well, I'll answer that in a second, but you said ramps. When I, my first car, I drove right over the ramps.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
You high-sided it, huh?
Yeah. So I never used those again. I gave them away or something.
Yeah, I get scared sometimes because I've almost done that. I had a time where I put in the wrong gear, and all of a sudden the thing teetered forward, and the ramp was like up at an angle, and the wheel was hanging over it. And Oh
Yeah.
no! But you know what I do now? Like even today when I was putting a hitch under the back of the Subaru, so I backed it up onto the ramps. But to prevent myself from going too far, I calculated about how far to go, and I use firewood because it's sort of like three-sided
Oh yeah.
split wood, so it
Yep.
makes a great chalk block. So I put the chalk blocks in front, but I also put ones that would prevent me from going too far because I get
Ah,
paranoid. All you got to
yeah.
do is goose it a little too much, and next thing you're going over, and now you're
Yep.
Yeah.
hanging the car. And so I got it up on there. And then the crazy, well, the stupid thing I did, I was going to have my brother help me hang this rack because it was pretty heavy. The frame hitch goes up underneath. So I had to lower the exhaust on the one side and had to, I don't know if you've ever done this procedure. I've never done it before. You use a snake wire, and I
Mhm.
had to actually
Yep.
bore up a bigger hole than there was there. I had to actually go in there and cut out a hole to make it bigger so that I could feed a snake wire, a bolt, and a spacer
Yep.
through one hole and pull it down through another, which seemed like it would be very hard to do. But amazingly enough, the snake wire pulled the bolt through the square spacer. It was like
Oh yeah.
a carriage bolt that had to lock into the spacer. So when you put the nut on, it wouldn't just spin because it's inside the frame. So
Yeah,
this
it's
whole
crazy.
procedure was pretty tricky. And
Yep.
then I had to hang this thing up under there and get the nuts on there. I'm like, how the hell am I going to do this? I need somebody to help me, but there's nobody else here. So I took a big cooler and I slid it under there, and that got me within a few inches.
Oh, okay.
So I got the cooler under one end, and then the hard part, I realized I had to do the exhaust end first because the muffler was hanging there kind of in the way. So I got that thing up in there, and I'm wrestling, and I realized, you invent all kinds of swear words or in these horrible positions.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
doing like an isometric sit-up exercise.
Oh yeah.
It's got your neck stiff as hell. Your back's hurting. You're reaching up under there, and
You're
I'm
raking
like
the
trying to.
crap out of the back of your hands.
Oh yeah, and I'm yanking down, trying to get this bolt in a position where I get the nut on. Of course, it doesn't
Yep.
want to catch. And you're like, oh, and you're like, I got to get this to catch. Well, I was very lucky. I had the thing barely balanced there. I was ready to slide off and fall, and I caught one thread. I'm like, okay, I got to keep this going. So I managed to tweak it on there. So I tweaked it on a few threads worth. I'm like, okay, good. I got one on there. So
Yep.
then I got that because of that, I was able to get a second one. I'm like, cool. If things don't fall and crash and burn, I'm going to sneak over here and try to get one on the other side. So I actually managed to get them all on there myself, but it was like I was waiting for everything to just break loose and land on
Oh
me,
yeah.
break my hands or something. But that was the hard part. And then I got the rest of it together over the next hour or so. But man, that was a lot harder than it was supposed to have been.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
it's kind of crazy how those things work. They, and I've seen that myself. I mean, goodness, we were doing Ford Field here in Detroit, the big football stadium for Monster Jam, and one of my friends, he's been in it probably almost 40 years now, doing the monster truck shows. He decides for the first time in his life he's going to try a backflip in his truck, and so he hits, and literally he comes over like that and drops it right down onto the top of the cage. Well, this guy builds his own chassis. It's good and strong. He didn't have to worry about that. 27 breaks in the chassis. The cage withstood it no problem. One of the big problems we had is because he broke something in the cradle, and that's the section in the center of the truck where all the bars come to, and that's where your transfer case is. Because of that, the jack shaft from the transmission to the transfer case shifted like 2 inches and wouldn't come. We literally had to get in there with pry bars and jack the transfer case up to where it met the right height so it could be reconnected. And then we had to hold it all in place with ratchet straps just so we could get it up on the trailer to get it home to fix it.
oh man,
So,
probably not worth it.
oh my gosh. Oh, I mean, this has been his living for, almost 40 years. That's what he does for a living. He builds all of his own trucks and everything. He does some great stuff. Matter of fact, let me see here. Where is that picture? I don't know if I still have it in here or not. I had a picture of me actually driving it, and it was, people don't realize that you have about as much room in the cockpit of a monster truck as they do in a NASCAR. It's cramped. It's hard to move around in there. Let's see. Well, there we go. And that's me behind the wheel of it.
Oh wow.
And it'll give you an idea just how cramped those things are up in there. My knees were literally an inch away from the steering wheel. So, and that was just driving it out onto the floor for him. But, I mean, those things are crazy. And, here I've shown it before. This was the last one that I had. And that truck right there weighed 17,000 pounds. And there wasn't a piece on it that didn't weigh 150 pounds. The daggone 4-link bars that come off the center of the frame there down to the axles, those are 150 pounds a piece. So there wasn't anything on that thing that was light. And so you had to invent new ways of putting things on and taking them off of that truck, as we did with with all of them. So it was you learn a lot of new tricks and techniques when you're doing that stuff, because that truck it's hand built. So there's nothing that's common on it that you'd find on anything else. So we literally made our own tools, like our jacks. We used hydraulic pumps that were battery actuated, and it was a 4-link system just so it would lift, the weight of that truck off the ground to get the tires on and off and stuff like that. Because you just couldn't go out and buy a floor jack, because it couldn't reach up to the bottom of the axle to lift it when the tires were on it. It couldn't reach high enough. So, necessity, the mother of invention. So, what's your priciest tool there, Chadwick?
I would say, just kind of going back similar to when I said, when I got my first degree in auto body repair, right. They gave us the 55% off Mac tools. So I did make one big purchase back in 1990s dollars. It was like $1,200. Okay. I still have all those tools in the garage. Still sanders and
most of my stuff, I try to get stuff from like yard sales and like on Facebook Marketplace, places like that. If I want something that's going to be a pricey tool, I'll look there first. And I like to look for things that, if they're not running, something that I would be able to fix and put it back together and get it up and running. It's without a doubt, the most expensive thing in my shop right now is that AP laser. That thing's probably about $50,000 is the value on that. But everything else in there is $1,000 or less nowadays. I don't spend any big money on anything. I just don't see the need for it anymore. Let's see.
That was kind of the same as me. I got that stuff in college, and it's like I haven't used it since. So after that, not buying expensive stuff just so I could use it a couple times. It's in the garage.
Now, do either of you do any welding at all?
Just in college.
Yeah, I've only dabbled with it with my brother when he had stuff going on. He was showing me how to weld things, but I've never taken it up or bought torches or bought a welder or any of that. Yeah. It's one of those things I've leaned on him for when I needed it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And there were times where I spent a lot of time, I learned how to MIG, TIG, Healy, arc, and all that. But to be honest with you, give me an old stick welder, an old Lincoln Buzz box, and a box of sticks, and I'll be happy all day long welding with that stuff. Let's see. There's John S., the proprietor of the plushies.
That's right.
Thanks again, John S.
I can fix an exhaust pipe with muffler clamps, old metal, tennis ball can, and muffler tape. That's how we used to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I coat hanger. The wife had a Chevy Chevette, and that thing, the muffler rusted off on it. We were trying to sell it. Didn't want to, the muffler was going to cost a couple $100 to get it put on there. I literally went and took one of those big cans of like baked beans and drilled holes all the way around it, stuffed it full of steel wool, and then, cut up the sides of it so it clamped down around the exhaust pipe, and then just put the fiberglass wrap around the whole thing so it didn't leak till it went through the steel wool. And that thing made a makeshift muffler that the guy that had it, when I saw him a year or two later, he still was running it with the same thing. It never gave him a problem.
Oh,
that's funny.
Oh,
that reminds me when I was a little kid, my dad, we were on a trip to Michigan where his folks lived, and it was, a number of hundreds of miles. So
we're about to
exhaust dropped out. Jackson.
Okay.
Little town. It's out near the Kellogg's plant, I think, and certain places that we used to go. But I remember him pulling over and realizing the exhaust had dropped out, and he hunted around. And back in the days when they had beer cans that were actually made of steel or heavier metal, he actually found a beer can that was about the right diameter and managed to saw out the ends of it and slip it on there and somehow secured it. So we were able to complete the trip.
And and that's how things used to be. We were talking about it on at least one or two times before. We talked about how the old owner's manuals of cars literally taught you how to do your own timing and everything like that. Nowadays, they tell you don't drink the oil.
How about it? Yeah, they used to tell you how to adjust the valves every so often and stuff like that. Nobody would have a clue how to do it, any of that now. Yeah. Well, it's a joke. Like the instructions, like lately, like it's funny. I gave Marilyn my swivel chair because she needed one in her office, and the boys had taken theirs with them, so I needed another one. So I went to Walmart, which I kind of hate to have to use Walmart, but there's nowhere else around here to get one. But I bought a swivel chair and put it together. But I mean, half the instructions were like ludicrous admonitions not to wrap the plastic bag around your head and try to breathe through it, and don't eat the bolts, and all this kind of nonsense. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Wow.
Well, and the sad thing is those things came about because people actually did that stuff. That's what gets me is that people actually did this stuff, so they had to put it in the owner's manual because they probably got sued at some point over it. And to me, it just kills me. I understand attorneys are going to make a living, and they have a responsibility. We were talking with Zach about that the other night, but I mean, just the people nowadays and the stupidity of some of the stuff they do, the pod challenges and all that.
Oh my God. Yeah. To talk about, do you have a death wish? I mean, who would do that?
Did you see the one where they would take rubbing alcohol and pour it on their arm or something and light it on fire and see how long they could do it, how long they could last before they had to put it out? And there's so many people ended up in the hospital with second and third degree burns because he didn't realize you can't see the flames from rubbing alcohol.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand.
I mean, why is these kids are so safe? They have to do things like that because now like back when I was a kid, you took your banana bike and you built a jump out of a piece of plywood and a couple cinder blocks, and you wanted to see how much air you could catch. And if you crashed and burned and landed on the front wheel, got banged up. Okay, that was a legitimate risk. You were doing something that deserved to be dangerous, not eating a Tide Pod or dumping alcohol all over yourself and lighting it up.
I'm surprised I could father children as many times as I racked myself jumping over ramps like that. I can remember, how many times you get the wind knocked out of you as a kid. That kind of stuff. And these kids nowadays, they have no idea. They have, you come home and the house is completely baby proofed and all that stuff. I got a friend to this day that he looks like the Joker because as a child, he bit a cord going to a lamp in the living room and it burned him right through there and scarred him. And, I mean, just, that's one of those, you survived it, you learned a lesson kind of things. These kids nowadays, that's why so many of them have anxiety problems, things like that. They've lived in a world that's been cushioned and baby proofed for them for so long. They don't know how to handle adversity or pain or anything out of the norm for them. And it's sad, I stopped hunting years ago just simply because I don't need to. But I raised my kids walking through the woods and showing them signs, showing them this is an edible plant. That's not an edible plant. This is something that you can use. You can use this to hold water with. And, these kids nowadays, my daughter's friends, they see a fly and they freak out. They're scared to death of a fly. I just, Lord help them. Let the internet drop and see what happens to these kids.
Yeah.
My word. So, all right. Well, Duncan, why don't you explain the backdrop there for us with the hubcaps there? I'd be surprised how many people actually know what hubcaps are anymore. So,
I know you don't see as many of them. Well, it's funny when these guys asked me to do this to join them for this chat. I'm like, this sounds kind of fun. This is cool.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, okay, I've got to convert the studio because Marilyn's got her yarn and all her crochet gear, and I've
Yeah.
got to somehow make this into a man cave. So it actually took a little while because, like, you see a bunch of license plates there, and they actually look fairly straight, but I had to hang them at an angle so they'd show up in the camera. But so the history of those. My brother actually, he's 2 years older than me, and when he was young, was an avid license plate collector, and he collected series. He had thousands of license plates. He sold off a lot over time, but the one on the top there is a 1914 Vermont plate, and I have more. That's a porcelain, one of the original porcelains in beautiful shape,
Oh, wow.
and so I had, this is going back some years, probably 5 or 6 years ago. I had a whole run of them. He'd given me like 10 of them, 10 years in a row. So like yeah, I had the 14 one up back in 2014, I think, and then I have a more of this run of porcelains, which are actually worth some money, and so I had that one hanging in our entry hallway for years, and I took that down because I redid the hallway and painted everything, and I realized I had it sitting in my office, and then there were other ones there which I won't turn around to look at them, going back into the 30s, the 20s.
Yeah, I
So
was
he
looking.
gave
You
me
got
the
37, 39.
Oh,
Yeah, I could see a couple of them there. That's really cool.
Yeah, the second to bottom one, you can actually see the Old Man of the Mountain. That was in 1926 New Hampshire. And so that's cool because we had a place in New Hampshire. We've always gone to New Hampshire. It's kind of our vacation spot.
Mhm.
And the Old Man of the Mountain was actually a feature up on the mountain. It was made of rock on a cliff, and
wow.
it disintegrated some years ago, probably got a 10 or more years ago. But I remember my dad was an avid hiker, and he would take us hiking all over the place. And we walked up to the actual Man of the Mountain. It was all held together with steel cables because it started shifting at one point.
Yeah.
And then I think at one point it just broke up and it couldn't be restrained. Like it just, things move and change over time because of frost and what have you. It finally
yeah.
collapsed. But that was that was sort of like New Hampshire's emblem, if you will.
That's
So
great.
so my brother Bruce had literally thousands of license plates. He still got a lot of them, but he'd given me over the years probably 40 or 50 of them. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll hang some of them on the curtains there. So I stiffened up the curtain rod that's holding the curtains there and added a center bracket so I could take a little weight. So I hung those off of it. And then you'll see just on one side, maybe I'll grab this. I'll see if I can make it more visible. But
If it's yarn, let it fall.
yeah, the yarn. Yeah, I had to actually put one of Marilyn's crocheted bees behind this, so I'd puff it out from the wall a little bit. But so these hubcaps came off various vehicles that were in the family, and I think one of my grandfathers had a Lincoln. So this is
Wow.
an old Lincoln hubcap, and I can't even tell you how old it is. I didn't try to Google it. Probably 40s.
Now, do you know how they around the filling in there around the name Lincoln? You know how they make that?
I don't know. It's not resin because they didn't have resin back then.
They use crushed glass and dye, and
Really?
then put it in an oven and heat it until it turns into a liquid and fills that space.
Yeah, this is a beautiful old hubcap. In fact, when I picked
Yeah.
this thing up, I think I took this out of my dad's basement after we had to sell their house. But it's a beautiful, heavy. This thing weighs as much as a bag of sugar easily. This
Wow.
thing, I look at this. I picked this thing up. It weighs about 20 times the weight of these other hubcaps. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
if you extrapolate this to the building of the entire car, the car must weigh 10 or 12,000 pounds because this alone, just a set of hubcaps, will weigh 20 pounds. So that's a beautiful old hubcap. And then the other ones up on the wall there, up on the curtain, the upper one came off a Plymouth my dad had, and I'd guess it was 50s based on the ones I looked up online. I couldn't find that exact one. It says Plymouth on it. It's kind of just a half circle kind of thing. And then oddly enough, the one below that is a hubcap off my first car I ever had. It was a 65 Plymouth Fury. And I didn't realize I still had that hubcap. I'm like, I feel like I've seen that somewhere. I think I saved one. So I went out in my back shed and I dug around, and sure enough, hanging on the wall in the corner of my shed, I had to climb over a bunch of crap to get to it, was a beautiful old hubcap from my 65 Plymouth. So I took it in the house and I cleaned it up with dish soap which I did with these others to get the grunge off. I'm like, this is pretty cool. These are actual souvenirs from, back in the family day, back in the day.
That's great.
Bringing up dish soap, we don't even use shop soap anymore. We've used dish soap for years because it cleans any grease off of anything.
It does. It's good stuff. The only other thing I keep around, like I needed it today, is this Gojo. I keep a can of Gojo under the sink because if it's really your hands are black and you weren't smart enough to use gloves, then that works pretty well. And then I'll do the final wash with dish soap because it takes off the residue that's still in your hands when you get done with the Gojo.
I'm one of them stupid people. I use carburetor cleaner.
Oh, that works. Probably not good for your.
You spray that.
That's old school.
But you have to keep your hands in oil for like 2 days because it draws every bit of moisture out of the skin.
Oh, it does. But, it's like my dad would use gasoline. Like, you got bugs on your windshield, gasoline. You got pitch on your car, gasoline. It's like, well, just don't smoke.
Hot can of Coca-Cola. Let it sit out in the sun for a little bit. You got bugs all over your windshield. Just regular Coca-Cola. Let it sit out in the sun and heat up. Open it up, pour it over your windshield. Let it set for about 5-10 minutes till it starts to dry, and then get in there with the brush, and it all comes right off.
Good to know.
That was, that's one of those old wives' tricks that I learned years ago when I was young. We would, come home and the car would be completely covered with, all the evening bugs and all that. And my mom was actually the one who showed me how to do that. And I was like, oh, okay. But you can also take an old dirty penny and put it into a glass and pour Coca-Cola, warm Coca-Cola in there. Let it set for a day or two, pull it out, and it'll look like a brand new penny. It literally eats everything off of it from the acidity in it.
Yeah, I used to hear, I don't know if you could drop a nail in a can of Coke and it would go away, because that navel jelly they used to sell, it was like a pink gel that you put on things. Phosphoric acid. That's what's in Coke. The active ingredient that dissolves things is phosphoric acid. So it's pretty rugged stuff. I don't know, it's probably not great for your body because you're drinking this stuff, but you can clean rust off things with it.
Oh yeah, it's crazy how this stuff works. You wanna if you have chrome and your chrome's looking bad, aluminum foil and Coca-Cola, and ball the aluminum foil up and rub it on the chrome. And that was an old trick we used to use that would help to bring chrome back to life. And work like a charm. Before you knew it, the piece of chrome looked amazing. So yeah, it's these old tricks these kids don't even know anymore. It's to me it's just crazy how these kids, how they even live nowadays. It's I have friends of my daughter and my son. They'll get a flat tire. They're calling roadside assistance. My wife called me one night. She goes, I got a flat tire. I go, okay. So I'm getting ready to throw my shoes on and everything. She goes, I'm in Northern Ohio. By the time you get to me, I'll already have the tire changed to be back on the road. I was just letting you know I had a flat. And sure enough, she called me 20 minutes later. She had it all changed and was back on the road. So I know grown men walking around, got these big bushy beards, look like big mountain men and all that. Can't even change the oil in their car, much less change a tire. So
yeah, what's cool is Austin, between my brother and I, we've taught Austin how to do a bunch of things. One night we were up at a gig fairly far away, and he came out later to load the tools up, and he had one of his front tires was flat. Oh man. Well, it turns out one of us had one of those small air compressors that you plug into the lighter, and I had a plug kit in my glove compartment. So we went around, we jacked the car up, we realized we had a nail in one of the tires, pulled it out, took the plug kit, got a plug in there, took the air compressor out. 20 minutes later, he's back on the road, good to go.
Yeah.
So if you carry the right stuff,
I got a flat on my zero-turn mower, and I did a video of taking the tire off, fixing the flat, and putting it back on. And you wouldn't believe how many messages I got from people like, where do you get that thing that you pushed into the tire to make it stop losing air? I just got tons of people sending me emails like that. And I'm like, literally, you can go to Walmart and find them in the automotive section.
Yeah, for like $10, and it doesn't weigh anything. You can stick it under the seat in your car. And if you got like those little air compressors are literally put about maybe 3-4 pounds, and they're good enough to inflate a tire if you get low on air. So if you got a tire with a slow leak, like a bead leak, and it gets low, you can take that little compressor out, takes a little while.
Oh yeah.
10 minutes, you're back up to speed. Or if you get a hole in a tire, you can pressure it, put a plug in there without even taking the wheel off. You can find it. I mean, sometimes you got to take the wheel off to locate the leak, but if you can jack it up and spin the wheel around, locate the problem,
Yeah, and
maybe
it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, we used to, like, with the monster trucks, we always kept, like, if we got a flat tire, we would keep the tire without the rim, and if we got a flat with the monster trucks, I've literally seen guys take, and they'll find where the flat is on the truck, where the hole is. They'll go in there and they'll scrape that up real heavy with a sander or grinder or something like that, or a wire wheel, and throw a bunch of contact cement on there, and then cut a piece of that tire that they had, put it over the hole, and use drywall screws and washers to hold it in place, and then just grind them off. I know a guy who probably did 10 or 15 shows on the same tire after he did that kind of fix to it, and held just fine. That's what I worry about with these kids nowadays, is they don't think about, if I don't have the exact tool that they say I have to have, how am I going to fix this problem? They don't know how to think outside the box and how to fix their own stuff, or even have the drive in them to want to fix it. And that scares the daylights out of me about this generation. We've got so many people. Everybody thinks, well, if they don't go to college, then they'll never be a success in life. Whereas if you just went to a skilled trade school, you'd make society that much better, because we'd have the skilled trades people out there being able to take care of things. So let's see here. Let's see. Used to use Mr. Machine furniture polish on my Monaro. What's a Monaro?
Good question.
Never heard of one. Oh, it's a Holden Monaro. It is a. That's interesting. I'm trying to find a decent enough picture I can put up.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Excellent. So that's a Holden Monaro.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
That's actually a pretty nice looking car.
Yeah, it is.
Says that it was, let me get back to it, rear wheel drive coupe, manufactured by General Motors Holden in Australia. Well, that's why we don't see them around here.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. Cool.
Looks a lot like, what was that Chevy car that looked like a Beretta or something like that? Kind of looks like.
I would say so, yeah, Beretta.
Yeah. It looks very familiar to cars I've seen, but it has that different look. Well, if you go to, like, Malaysia, they have a car company over there called Proton, and you see them. Everybody in Malaysia drives them, and it's a Malaysian car company. And man, they got some nice looking cars, and they don't cost much at all. Oh, it was a '69 Monaro. Okay, let me look.
Cool. That was way ahead of its. Oh, it wasn't the one we were seeing.
Oh, wow.
That would be cool.
Let's see. No, trying to find a good sized picture of one. Oh, that's nice. Let's see here. There we go.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
Man, that looks like
It's like a GTO. What does it say on the front of it?
It says
GTO.
Holden GTS.
Wow.
So it looks kind of like a Nova front end on it, almost.
I was going to say Nova.
Yeah.
But a little smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
That's pretty slick. That's I like the let's see. Yep, I just Jenny, I just pulled it up. Fluffy dice on the mirror. You remember that? Oh my gosh. Well, it's like we were talking about earlier when we were talking about your hubcaps there. There used to be a place that we used to drive by every day by where we used to live, and they just had big racks of hubcaps out there for sale.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had one too.
Find
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
And half these kids nowadays don't even know what a hubcap is. So
You had to either go to that store or the junkyard if you wanted a hubcap.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they don't even have boneyards around here anymore. It's hard to find one. They,
we've got a lot of
them out and get rid of them.
We've got the salvage yards, and we've got a lot of pick and pulls where you go in and you actually remove the parts yourself. That's if you can ever find that elusive 10 millimeter.
Yep. Yeah, we used to have a few of them around that were very handy. I'd go to them, and now the closest one is probably an hour and a half away. And nowadays, a lot of them will just disassemble the cars and pull the parts and rack them and scrap out the rest of them. And
one of the things we're finding here is they're taking the cars, they're completely dismantling them down. Everything's taken apart, throw them into shipping containers, and then they're shipping them overseas.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You ever see some of those some of the shows out of Cuba, how they have to hand make parts for cars and how they're using parts from different vehicles and different kinds of equipment to make their cars run? Everybody always looks at it and they're like, oh man, they got the 1950s cars in Cuba, and man, those things look great. I actually saw a video where a guy takes pieces and beats them and makes brake rotors and brake pads by hand.
Wow.
That's the crazy thing is, they literally can't get parts over there. I was watching one video, one show where a guy was trying to get into this club, and your vehicle had to look a certain way, had to run a certain way so you could get licensed as a taxi for tourists. And he actually used the engine, a diesel engine out of a boat in an old Buick that he owned.
That's great.
Necessity, mother of invention. It's like those K trucks, bringing those over here and trying to drive them on the road. You got to find a way to make them so that they're able to not only handle, but they're able to hit the highway speeds that are required to make them legal. This dog is snoring.
There you go.
Yeah, it's
okay. All right. He makes good foot warmer, though. I got to tell you that. So I'm glad that made you happier there, Ricky. It's you were talking about the old days and all that. Chad and I have talked about it before. I remember the day when I was young and we would go down to our property in Kentucky, and literally we would stop on the old roads in the mountains there in Kentucky, and you could literally get out and there'd be water flowing right out of the rocks coming down, all natural spring water. You could put a glass up to it and drink it. I mean, those days, I remember back in the 70s going to Florida, and we would stop at the roadside stands, which you don't see anymore because Florida made all these laws that basically killed all the mom and pop little joints. But you'd stop at these roadside stands, and they'd have these big wooden barrels sitting there, and you'd lift the lid on it, and it'd be full of baby alligators. They'd be selling them for like $5 a piece or something like that. People were literally buying baby alligators at these stands and bringing them back home with them. All these things you don't see anymore. Nowadays, you go down to Florida, want to see an alligator, and most people never leave Disney property while they're there. So they have to go into town and pay to go to some putt-putt golf where they can see some baby alligators swimming around in a little kid's pool. To me, it's astounding. When I go someplace like that, I don't want to be stuck. We love going to Orlando. We love all that stuff, but I prefer to be out in the middle of nowhere. We fish the intercoastal waterways out of Daytona. Joys of living right down the road from a fire department. Can you hear it?
Yeah, I can definitely hear it.
Yeah.
I was going to say one thing I like about Vermont, and this sounds a little funny because if I'm somewhere else and I don't know where I am, I'm going to look for familiar things. If I want coffee, I'll go to a Dunkin' Donuts because half the Dunkin' Donuts I go to, the coffee's garbage, but at least it's a name, But one thing in Vermont that's funny is I got my own gravity feed spring water, which I'm very grateful for. But if I go I can walk up half a mile up the road, and there's actually an open spring bubbling out into from a pipe and basically going into a bunch of gravel and disappearing under the road. But people regularly, every time I drive by, there's people there filling up blue jugs because it's free. And then you go up another couple miles in another little town. There's another place you go by the road. There's a spring access. You can just fill up bottles of spring water. when my son Austin and Carter come up, they're in town in North Adams, and the water tastes like crap. Typical chlorinated,
Oh yeah.
they'll take the municipal sewer water, run it through a coffee filter, and that's what you're drinking. So he'll come up to fill up jugs at the house. But that's one thing. But one thing was actually really interesting to me is I've known years ago that there's places you can camp for free that are just completely like state property, and up
Right.
on Route 9 up in Woodford, which is just sort of a remote part of Vermont known for like being snowmobile access to the vast trail system, which is Vermont Association of Snow Travelers, and it runs from where we are all the way to Canada. So it's a very popular winter snowmobile thing. You can park up here near my house, get on your sled, and go all the way to Canada. And
That-
people love it, and they do this kind of thing. But what's this? I'll get to the end of my story so you can
you're good.
take over the conversation.
Oh
But
no.
what's
Okay.
funny is like there's a lot of state parks around here, and there's one called Woodford State Park, and it's got a beautiful little lake, and it's high elevation. So I went up there today to take a swim after working on the car because I was achy and sore, and I find cold water very therapeutic. So I ran up there to Woodford to take a dip, and the water was down to 60. I couldn't stay in my usual length of time, but nevertheless, the other day I went back and I'm like, I wonder if that campground's still there. It's literally nothing but a dirt access road into a state forest. And there's state forests in Vermont that are like, there's one called the George Aiken Wilderness, and we used to call it the Aiken George Wilderness because you can go in there. And one time we were on a hike with a bunch of people, and one of the girls in our group, we were crossing an old wooden snowmobile bridge, and she fell through it and right up to her armpits.
Wow.
So we pulled her up out of it, and we're like, okay, we're not taking that bridge again. It was an old one. But so you can go out in those places. But what was interesting is I knew years ago there'd been a place you could just drive into this dirt road, and there were campsites, and there was no supervision at all. There were just a road going into the woods, and there were little streams going through, and it was completely remote. And you could just camp there. Well, the other day I went up to Woodford, and on the way back, I'm like, I wonder if that road's still there, if that camping is still available. I mean, this is the kind of thing nobody would know about unless they were local, probably. But if you did, that would be very cool. I drove down this road very slowly, kind of driving through this road. Sure enough, there was little campsites that were nothing but like a little driveway into a clearing. And I think out of 7 of them that were there, 5 of them were occupied by guys, people with tents or RVs or whatever. One of them looked like an RV that had been there a long time. I'm like, I wonder if even the state guys even bother to supervise this. It doesn't cost anything. There's no facilities. There's no nothing. If you want to camp there, you can just camp there, do whatever you want to do. Hopefully you don't leave a mess, and you can leave. But the place is clean. There's not trash anywhere. I'm like, this is really amazing. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that probably would love to know about this. So there's probably guys out there that are hard up or just want to be out in the middle of nowhere that would just go in there and camp. 0 cost, no rent, no mortgage, nothing. You just bring a tent or an RV in there, park it, and you could work in Bennington or in town. I'm like, these are just really interesting little quirky things that are just part of Vermont that nobody would even guess were there.
We've got a lot of those in northern Michigan, and it's a big thing nowadays where you have these young people that are trying to live. They're trying to live in as minimal footprint as possible. They're taking school buses, the smaller school buses, and U-Haul trucks and things like that, converting them into RVs. And to look at them from the outside, you think it's just an old school bus or an old box truck. You go inside, and it has every modern amenity you can think of. And these folks literally are just going from town to town to town. They'll pick up an odd job here or there, they make crafts and sell them. And they just make enough money to keep them going, keep them fed, and buy gas for the year. And it's really interesting. If you ever get a chance, look on YouTube. There's a guy who does urban stealth camping, and he's out of Canada. And this guy literally finds places right off of major roadways, highways, rest stops. In one place, there's a roundabout, and it has trees and bushes and all that growing up there, and it has the "Welcome to City" sign. And he literally stealth camped behind that for the night. And so it's really interesting to see how these folks are doing that stuff nowadays. Um, have you seen a lot of these new tiny homes that they're coming out with? They're they're supposed to be these little, they basically are sheds that they put on top of a trailer, and then they outfit them like as a house, but everything's tiny. And I was looking at the prices on these things. They're wanting anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 for some of these tiny houses. And I'm like, my goodness, you could buy an actual house for that much money.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
you don't have to have a vehicle to tow it. So,
what's funny? That little white truck you were kind of promoting there.
Oh, the K truck.
That little K truck. I looked at that. My first thought was, you can make a hell of a nice little camper. It reminded me of the old Volkswagen Vanagons or the VW buses. I'm like, you could build, and if you use lightweight materials as a trick, is to keep it lightweight, you could build a nice little camper onto that thing, and it would probably take you up into the woods places and be a pretty cool thing to live out of.
Yeah.
Well, I'll show you, because there's as many times I've been to Japan and folks I know from over in Japan. There you go.
Wow.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, it's even forest green. It'll hide. Very cool. Yeah, so you got your sleeping quarters, and it looks like a sort of tent-like structure you just raise up to get the height you need. Very cool.
What do they call those? The pop-up campers. So
yeah, see, I actually want to buy. That's why I put a trailer hitch on my little car. I'm like, I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, you know what? I mean, I like doing, getting away and doing an Airbnb or, staying in a motel or something for comfort. Right. But I'm like, well, now that the kids are on their own, it's like we could do a little bit of camping. I mean, I used to like camping, but it's funny. So I'm showing my age here, but I mean, when I was a kid, I lived in the woods a lot. I mean, literally in the summer, I had friends that liked to camp, and we would go out and take our guns and our fishing rods and just live in the woods for weeks at a time. And we loved it. And I mean, there's a part of me that still loves that. I still love bicycling. My body won't tolerate it anymore, but we biked up to the top of Mount Washington. We biked all over the place. We lived out of our bikes and the bags and everything that we could carry, our gear. That when I was a kid, I loved doing that stuff. And now that I'm older, I'm like, and I had a friend of mine's father used to joke with us when we'd camp. He'd say, yeah, the older you get, the thicker the padding you need. I mean, you're damn right. Because at my age now, is like if I don't have a mattress that's at least 6 or 8 inches thick, it's inadequate. And the other thing is simply weather. Like I've camped in all kinds of conditions, but sleeping on a pile of rocks or getting rained on or waking up in a pool of water in the morning, I'm too over that stuff. But so then I thought, well, what's deterring us from camping now? I really like camping. I don't mind using lean-tos and all, but you still got to have the air mattress. I'm like, well, you know what? When I was a kid, my folks had a pop-up camper, and we'd take it to Maine and camp. And they used to have campgrounds that were almost right on the beach. They were really nice.
Oh yeah.
And we'd go and stay for a week or two, and you would just walk from the campground over to the beach, and it was beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, if you get a camper, I don't care. I don't need any bells and whistles or complicated things. If it'll keep the weather out and it's got a comfortable bed with a thick enough mattress, I've got Coleman stoves and lanterns and all the other amenities. And if it has some extras like that, great. But if it doesn't, I don't give a damn.
Now, since you're good at woodworking and all, have you thought about making a teardrop camper?
That's interesting. I feel like, there's a lot of work in that. If I can get a camper for a reasonable price. I mean, I started looking, and people are selling these pop-ups, older ones, for like, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000. So for me, I would rather spend the money, because even though it's fun to build, you got to build it really lightweight.
What I worry about with those is when you're buying the used campers, it's a crapshoot, because here's one in the building process.
Wow.
And it's literally plywood and 2x4s.
Yeah.
And but we've made them before. I've helped make a couple of those for friends, and we would go to Harbor Freight, and I don't know if they still have them or not, but Harbor Freight used to have these 4x8 trailers kits that you could buy and put together. And so we would use those as the base. And the thing is that you're talking less than $500. You have a brand new camper.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool.
And you doing woodworking and all, you could be able to put that together yourself And you could probably figure out a way to make it lighter. Instead of using the full 2x4s, you could use like 1x2s or something like that for your cross sections. And then what they do is they use like a tin sheeting or fiberglass sheeting that they put over top of that. And then on the inside, they just put the insulation in there and then run plywood sheeting on the inside. And so they've got, you've got a nice little camper that really inexpensive. It's very lightweight. And I'll find another picture here so you can see what they look like out of the back of them, because that's one of the cool parts is the when they how they fix them up, because you've got over 6 foot of length to sleep in there. And then the back of them, that's a good one right there. Let me get it a little bit bigger so you can see it better. But this one shows the back of it. And so what they've done with this, if you look back here, and they're literally using like a 1x3 or something like that to hold it open. But, they use solar panels, car battery, and all that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Nowadays, you can get all these things. I know people that will set up like they'll have some sort of Starlink thing there and solar panels and batteries. I mean, you can really get some amenities rigged into these things.
Well, if you look right beside the door here, right above the door, that's just one of those solar security lights that you put on your house or by your walkway.
Cool. That's pretty neat.
And on the inside, now it looks like they just put sleeping bags in there, but you can put a mattress in there or a foam setup.
Yeah, you make it big, and that's the cool thing. Yep. You make it any size you want in a way. You can. And I would just put like 1 or 2 inch foam on the walls, so you have a little bit of, heat retention. And
I've got one of my friends has one, and he has a tiny window air conditioner that sets on his. And so when they get to campgrounds, he has it set up so he can plug into the box at the campground, and they can run their air conditioner in there. So if it's really hot, they can sleep at night comfortably.
Yeah.
But that little setup right there, $800 they spent to make that. It says a 10-hour assembly. I don't believe that. I think it took longer than that.
Of course, it's going to take longer than that.
That's one of those ones where here I am. I'm going to change the transmission out of my car. It only took me 15 minutes. It only should take you 30. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
But literally, I mean, they're just, they go to a scrapyard and they find pieces off of other campers that they're using to put on them. And this looks like one of those little Harbor Freight trailers.
Yeah. Well, that's actually very cool. Just have a base that you can build off of and then keep things nice and lightweight. I mean, nowadays you've got a lot of very strong materials you can use that.
Oh, yeah.
Something
that's really strong that works really well for those kinds of things are the fiberglass wall sheets that you can put on there. And they're like $24 a sheet, 4 foot by 8 foot. And they're bendable. So you can attach them.
Yeah. They take a curve. Yeah. That's cool.
With that one, it looks like they didn't go with the actual curves. What they did was they went with the angle cuts on it. So
that way you're using flat pieces.
Yeah. But I mean, a little thing like that weighs next to nothing. You'd be able to pull that behind the Subaru, no problem at all. And it'd be a nice little thing. And it's just you and Marilyn, or just you. It's going to be something that's comfortable and cozy. You put a little cook station in there with your little Coleman cooktop and all that. I've seen them where they actually have things that fold out so that you can have them, not stuck underneath that little roof thing. But the pop up on the back of it is nice because it keeps rain off of everything. So,
yeah.
It's those are nice little setups. And like I said, I've helped friends put them together, and it's only taken us a day or two to actually build one. It takes them a couple days more to finish it out with all the things they need, but they're very inexpensive, less than $1,000, and you got yourself a decent little camper you can haul anywhere. So
yeah, and what we like to do, like our son-in-law and our daughter Haley that you know of, they camp all the time because he's got 4 kids and they love camping and they're always camping. So it's like, we're always going down there, always borrowing my Easy Ups and lanterns and all this stuff. But it's like, I'm like, yeah, all you got to do is you have enough room in there. You just, when you go camping, you throw an Easy Up in there and your cooler and your lantern and your stove. And I like these little mini grills. I always make sure I have a mini grill because it's the greatest thing. You just set it up, tank of propane, you cook burgers and whatever on that thing. very handy and lightweight. So you throw a bunch of stuff like that in there, you can create, like if you don't have an awning on a camper, you just set an easy up and now you're at some weather protection. But
yeah,
I mean, I'm actually getting excited about getting back into camping.
you can literally
realizing
take PVC piping, create a rectangle, attach a tarp to it, and just use poles to hold it up. And you've got yourself your own little awning there on the side that,
yeah,
a $5 tarp from Harbor Freight, and you've got yourself a nice little setup that just breaks down and throw it right inside of it. So
you just get a bag of tent stakes and a little bit of rope and bang.
I remember we went deer hunting one year, and it was my best friend at the time. He said, "Hey man, I know these guys out of West Virginia that are going to be out there hunting the same area we are. We can hang out with them while we're there." And we showed up, and these guys had like 20-year-old trucks that were ready to fall apart. And one of them had taken plywood and 2x4s and basically made a truck camper in the back of his truck, in the bed of his truck. And they were all going to sleep in there for the night. And I looked in there, and this thing is just plywood and roofing nails or whatever. And they had a wood burning stove inside of there to heat it up.
That's great.
And my buddy said, you going to come camp out with us? I go, no. I think I'm just fine. I'm going to sleep across the front seat of my truck and let it run all night. And that way I'll have heat going. I'm not worrying about all that. He's like, oh no, it'll be fine. I'm like, dude, all it takes is one of them to open the door, a spark come out of that, and that's going to burn that whole truck to the ground in no time at all. And they, I couldn't believe it. I'm surprised they didn't suffocate in there with all the fumes and everything.
Scary. Yeah.
But we were, we got up the next morning and we're hunting. We had our spots picked out. We're waiting for sun to come up. And I remember those guys are sitting there. I see my buddy. I see him lift up and fire. And I look down, and down probably 100 feet down from us, down by the lake edge, there was a buck sitting down there. Well, he hit it. You'd see the buck start to fall, and then takes off and goes running. Those guys decide they're going to go running after this buck. It ran back in the marsh. And I'm like, y'all are out of your minds if y'all think you are going to go back up in that marsh and get that deer. And they're like, oh no, we'll get it. They all come back about 3 hours later. They had mud all the way up to their shoulders where they had went out in that marsh, and they're all sitting there. They're freezing to death. And I'm just looking at them. I go, y'all feel better now? And they go, nope. I go, guess you didn't find your deer, did you? He goes, we had the trail and then we lost it. While we're sitting there, this truck goes driving by with this deer completely covered from head to toe with mud strapped to the hood of the car, and goes driving by. And my buddy was looking at it going by. He goes, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, dude, you ass shot that deer anyway. What are you talking about? That's why you didn't drop it. Oh, this, some of the things I've seen these guys do while hunting. Oh, absolutely kills me. There was a couple of them went out in a van. A couple of brothers were out in the van scouting the area, and they come up on this deer that's about 20, 30 feet off the side of the road, just sitting there grazing. The guy jumps into the back of the van, slides the door open, drops the deer, jumps out, throws it in the van. It's illegal to hunt from a vehicle for a deer. Throws it in the van because they're afraid they're going to get caught by the DNR. And so they take off driving, and they start hearing something as they're driving down the road. They turn around, the deer's alive. The guy decides he's going to go Rambo, takes his Bowie knife, puts it in his teeth with the blade, with the sharp edge out like that, goes back there, and it took him about 20 minutes to dispatch it. But during that time, that deer cut him up so bad, when we saw him about 2 days later, he come walking in looking like the mummy. He'd had over 300 stitches from all the damage that deer had done to him. I'm like, oh my gosh, your family tree's got one branch, man. You all need to stop playing around.
That would make a great country song.
But they were, you know what? They were some of the best guys you ever saw. They'd work themselves to death to help you. They'd give you the shirt off their back. But wow, the hold my beer and watch this moment with those guys were priceless. I couldn't believe it. I mean, this guy comes in, he'd spent 2 days in the hospital. He comes over to the hunting camp. He comes in. He's like, yeah, look at me. Boy, that deer tore me up like it. And his brother reaches over, grabs a bottle of Jack Daniels, and starts pouring it all over his fresh stitches. This guy started screaming, running around like he was on fire. I'm just like, oh my gosh. I'm looking at these guys. I'm like, I don't see how any of you are going to make it to 50 years old. Jeez. I thought I'd beat my body to death, but my goodness. This is a good one from Marshawn. Top 5.
Hi, Joni out there.
Camping. Chad, you do any camping at all?
Not really. I would like to get into it, though. It seems fun.
What are 5 states you'd like to go camping in?
Oh, that's a good question. Sounds like Vermont. I want some of that spring water.
Yeah, you got to do it.
There you go.
I don't know about the other states. I'd have to think about it.
What about you, Duncan?
Well, if I go back, God, the 40 years that trip my brother and I took, there were some places that were really fun. Like I love the Northeast. That's where I want to stay. But Northern California, Montana, Washington, that was a beautiful state. Anywhere, the California coast. I mean, there were some very cool places that we ended up, and even places like Utah that are kind of desolate and barren, Arizona, like places that you drive out. I remember, actually, what's interesting? My brother's been posting on we have a little group chat, and he was going through the diary of when we were on that trip. And a couple of, I think yesterday we were in Reno, Tahoe area. That was absolutely beautiful. I love that. Lake Tahoe is beautiful. So we did stop in there and spend some time at the casinos in Reno and everything. But then after that, we started going east, and we wound up in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And we had one kind of scary experience. So we're living out of the 61 Volkswagen Bug, and we had just enough gear in there to live out of it. And we were getting low on food, and we were driving through just areas that were just a dirt road that went forever. And we were wondering because this is in the days when you're basically driving and navigating based on a Rand McNally road atlas, no cell phone, no means of communication except for like payphones and postcards. So we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we're beetling along, and it's beautiful country, but we're like, wow, we're in the middle of nowhere, and it gets late in the day, and we're like, I think we need to figure out where to spend the night. And we look up, and there's this beautiful grassy hill going up, just off the road. So we just beetle off into this grassy hill, and we get up on this fairly high on this hill, and we park the car, and we're like, well, do we have anything to eat tonight? And we're looking, we had like 3 potatoes and some salt. And literally, this is what we had to deal with. So we set up camp, we set up a fire, and the sun starts getting lower and lower. And all of a sudden we hear this roar, and we look down, and there's this big pickup truck. It wasn't a monster truck. It was a jacked up pickup truck. And it starts roaring. It roars off the road and goes up toward us. And all of a sudden we look at each other. And I think we were both having the same thought. Remember that movie, Deliverance?
Mm-hmm.
We're unarmed. We're unprepared. And here's this big pickup truck with a bunch of guys with guns coming up at us. Like, we are in potential trouble.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, we were a little nervous. So these guys pull up, and we're in the middle of nowhere where you never expected to see anybody. And they jump out, and they walk over to us, and we're just sitting there. Hey, how's it going? And they're like, hey, we're just scouting for deer, like elk or whatever they were looking for. You seen any around here? And we're like, in a big, vast sigh of relief, like, actually not. We just pulled up here to set up camp for the night, but we haven't really seen anything. But,
Keep
and we're like, we'll let you know if we do, even though we're never going to see them again, right? So they're looking around. Oh, thanks. And then they take off, and we look at each other. Holy shit. Talk about feeling helpless. But anyway, there's a lot of beautiful parts of the country I would go back to. There's just a little bit of a drive. But I mean, I like to re-explore some of those spots.
I like Michigan. I think we have some great camping in northern Michigan. Nowadays, you have to be a little careful. They now know that we have mountain lions back in Michigan. There's just too many sightings on trail cams. That the black bears don't really bother you, but Michigan has some really good camping. I like the Northeast. I like those states over there. Kentucky's one of my favorites. Other than that, I don't like doing a lot of camping in a lot of the southern states between the heat and there's just enough to just drive you nuts with everything that's going on all night long around those places. So yeah, I like more of a northern state for camping and things like that. Um, let's see. Here's one from Electric Boogaloo. Have any of you been to Australia?
Nope.
Nope. No, I've
I-
always thought that would be very cool to explore, but I've never been there.
Yeah, looks beautiful in the.
yeah,
In
I've been
the,
to
TV.
Canberra and Sydney, and we were supposed to go to Brisbane, but the pandemonium shut the country down the day before we were supposed to fly out from it. So had a great time. There's really some beautiful land there. You know, what's crazy is that you only see the saltwater crocs from the midpoint of the country north, because with it being on the other side of the equator, the northern parts are the hotter parts like Florida, Louisiana, and all that for us. For them, the northern parts are the hotter parts, and that's where you see your big crocs. But they literally have some of the world's most venomous snakes through that entire country. And for a herper like me, that's fantastic to be out there and just walking along, seeing a red belly black, a tiger snake, king brown or a mulga, the taipans. Oh, it's just fantastic. But I don't think I would want to really camp in Australia. Everything there is made to kill you. So, but it is. It's some really beautiful place, and there's some really good people there. Everybody I know from Australia, I absolutely love. I have a good friend that's a retired federal police officer. I got a real good story about was going back when I was doing the MMA stuff. We were going up to scout out a location to do a show in northern Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula. And once you get off of the highway, there's a Route 2 that goes all the way across the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We got on there, and we had probably been I know the spider. That's what I was saying, Ricky. Everything is meant to kill you there. Them spiders. But we're going across the Upper Peninsula because we're coming all the way from the eastern side to the far western side by the Wisconsin border. And we're driving. We had been probably a half hour to an hour. We hadn't seen a house, a light, a car, nothing. And my buddy's sitting there telling me, man, I got to use the bathroom. You need to find a place quick. And so I pulled over the side of the road and I said, hey, man, I said, just get out and go. It's not like anybody around here is going to see you. Oh, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I said, why? He goes, well, didn't you see the sign back there? I go, what sign? He goes, the one that said bear crossing next 10 miles. I looked at him. I go, are you serious? And he said, yeah. I go, dude, what are the chances we're actually going to see a bear out here? And he's like, nope, not doing it. I said, okay. So I get out of the car and I'm standing in front of the car and I'm waving my arms, dancing and woo, making all kinds of noise. And I said, look, there's no bear. I get in the car, go to put it in drive. And as soon as I went to pull off, a black bear literally ran across the road 10 feet in front of us.
That's funny.
I was like, you got to be kidding me. Let's see. How about Alaska? You guys been to Alaska?
I actually did have a chance to go there. My folks, many years ago, back in the 90s, had a trip booked, and it was actually kind of nice because they had booked a cruise on a small ship with a bunch of time in Alaska itself. And at the last minute, my mom's back gave out. She was in terrible pain and couldn't go, and they had trip insurance. She was about to pull a plug on the trip, and then she realized ever since I was a little kid, I'd wanted to go to Alaska. And so I get this phone call like at night at one point, and she says, hey, do you want to go to Alaska? And I'm like, my chin drops to my knees. I'm like, huh? And she says, yeah, I've had to cancel out of our trip because I threw my back out really badly and I can't even walk. Would you like to go with your dad? And I'm like, shit, yes. How could I possibly, I'd always wanted to go to Alaska, not for the least reason that there's no allergies there and it was beautiful. And I loved snow and mountains and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, to make the story shorter, I was actually able to, we flew out to Seattle and then flew out from there, got on a cruise ship, and a small one, a really small one that could go up into the fjords and
Oh,
everything
is
like
that
that. It
the
was
glacier boats?
yeah, and it was sort
Yeah.
of nature oriented. We went up the Inside Passage past Vancouver and everything, which I learned how to deal with the fact that when you're in a small ship and you're going, the Inside Passage kind of protects you from the waves and the surf and everything. When you get out on open water, that gets kind of rough.
Oh
And
yeah.
if you're ever in a boat, like I haven't done, I've avoided cruise ships. It hasn't been a thing in general for me, but I learned certain lessons, like do not be on the bow or the stern of the boat. Be in the middle because you're going to get a lot less up
Oh
and
yeah.
down motion. Because I did have a couple days where I got pretty seasick, but then I adjusted to it, and after that it was a blast. And we did travel, and the fact they had booked a fairly nice trip, so that we did, stay in motels and nice little places, and get up in the morning and there'd be the newspaper and waiting outside your door. But the funny thing about that Alaska trip was that it must have been around April or something. But one thing I do remember is my dad and I would be sitting out in the boat talking, and at one point I'd be like feeling really spacey, like I'd been sedated. I'm like, and I'm watching this beautiful sunset, and I suddenly dawns on me that sunset's been sitting there in the sky for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
The sun never set, and it's
Mhm.
3:30 in the morning, and I'm like, I'm tired. I wonder why I'm tired. Well, yeah, that the sun literally dips in the sky and comes back up. So
Oh
you
yeah.
really don't, you have to
Oh, wow.
deliberately go back in your cabin to get enough sleep so you can function, because it was 2 days for every one. You're up at 5 in the morning. You've got to be out there to catch the next bus, train, plane, whatever was waiting for you. And you go through a whole day's itinerary, and then you had a whole nother day ahead of you before the sunset, and it never set.
Oh
So
yeah.
we did so much. It was absolutely beautiful. I mean, the mountains, the snow, the glaciers. We even visited like where the Exxon Valdez had spilled oil, and we went through all these pristine and beautiful, forget what the name of the bay was, but I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I would love to go back there. It was just the
Did you
most
see the Northern
beautiful.
Lights while you were there?
That's one thing I don't remember really seeing, and I'm surprised. I would have loved to, because it's actually been visible around here, except the fact that we haven't had the weather to allow it. But I
Right.
mean, that's something that I would have loved, but I don't remember actually really seeing any substantial amount of the Northern Lights up there when we were there. It just
We
must
we
not have been good timing.
we can actually see them here in Michigan certain times of the year. Um, yeah, I got to go to Juneau and I forget where else in Alaska, but yeah, one of the things that really got me was we, coming from Appalachia, Kentucky, and the West Virginia area, and we have the Appalachian Mountains there. But when you get out there and you see the Rocky Mountains and then those Alaskan mountains, you're just like, whoa, those are on a completely different plane. The mountains we've got in Appalachia are nothing compared to those things. But I thought Alaska was awesome. I liked Canada, northern Canada, where you get away from, we took one roadway across. We did a monster truck show in Montreal, and then we had to be in Vancouver, which is all the way over on the western side of the country. And we took this one road, and we went probably a day where we saw nothing. And it was just all beautiful scenery the whole way, just these huge mountains, all kinds of wildlife out there. And you didn't even see cars passing you. And, so that's a lot like Alaska's the same way. Have you ever run into a brown bear?
I saw them there, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
personally collide with them. Like we did see, like the coolest thing was, this was a little ship, and I don't remember how big it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it would go into the fjords. Like it wasn't like we'd see the big cruise ships that were way out there, and they'd send little boats in to, land here and there in the little towns. And we could get in there, and these people, it was young people that were basically manning this boat, and we would get in as close as they dared get, and we'd see bears and all kinds of cool stuff. So it was beautiful. But what was interesting there is that so many of these little towns are only accessible by boat or air. So there's the only ones that had any roads. Like at Juneau, it was fairly big. Anchorage was big. Anchorage was a disappointment because it seemed run down to me. There were, people on the streets and earthquake damaged buildings and things
Oh,
like
wow.
that. But the rest of it, like Ketchikan and Juneau and some of the little places, literally only accessible by boat or plane. And they were little cannery towns, and they would have networks of roads, but the cars, you'd see these beautiful old cars that probably had like 20,000 miles on them. You were literally driving on about 50 miles worth of roads in these little towns. So these
Yeah.
cars, there's no way to wear them out. So how they got there must have gotten over on boats, and people would just fly in and out with little float planes. But
Oh,
these
yeah.
towns were completely isolated from one another, where there was no road network joining one town to the next. They were isolated cannery towns that you could get off the boat and go in there and hang out and see the local, whatever it was. They had Eskimos, or I forget what they called them.
The Inuits.
Inuits, yeah.
Yeah.
And they'd put on a little show or whatever, and you could go and see some of the local stuff. But I mean, it's such a vast area, and like you were saying, you're seeing these beautiful snow-covered mountains covering thousands of square miles, it seemed like. And these little towns only covered a few acres. And the funniest thing was, these little towns, these houses were practically on top of each other, and these would be a few miles worth of roads. And then you've got thousands of acres of uninhabited wilderness. I'm like, this is really strange. It was just a weird perspective.
And it's interesting. You see, when you see a lot of the, I guess I call it reality TV type stuff, and you see the folks living in those areas, and watching how that they live off of nature. I mean, they go out and they'll kill a moose or a caribou, and that'll feed them for the entire winter. And you see the guys that have those big trap setups where they're literally just scooping salmon right out of the river and then freezing them up. And then they've got that they feed, their dogs with that stuff. It's amazing how they have this existence that is, they basically get everything that they need from the nature around them. And, they're completely isolated. There's, 30 people living in this town, and 90% of the people get around on either 4x4s or on snowmobiles, and, just completely isolated from the rest of the world. So it's amazing stuff. I was talking to an Alaskan trooper, and he said that sometimes they'll get call outs and it'll take them 2 to 3 days to get to where the call out is. And they, and they'll go in, they're like Texas Rangers. They'll go in by themselves to handle these situations, and they never know what they're getting into or how the community is going to react, because they don't know how the community feels about law enforcement. So it's incredible. But I'm looking here. We are 2 hours and 12 minutes into it. And my thing is I always try to cut them at 2 hours, but this has been really good. Duncan, I'd like to have you come back if you're up for it.
Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. I'd be up for it. Be posted on,
Yeah. If Babs there won't kill you for keeping her room as man cave form. So
well, I'll probably have to take down my props but I'll keep them at hand. You know what I mean? It didn't take longer to set them up than it would again.
Learn how to make it mobile.
Fun. Yeah. Well, you know what? This will motivate me. I'm going to work on setting up my office, and then I probably got to invest in a little more equipment so that I can make this all happen. But this is actually very cool.
Any suggestions or anything? Just get hold of me or Chad. We're always more than happy to help out. And you don't have to spend a ton of money to have to produce good quality content. It's really, I'm, like I said, I've got literally less than $100 in everything I've got sitting here to do my live streams. So it's
very cool.
It's doable. So Duncan, you got any parting thoughts for us before we head out of here?
Well, I was going to share one thing that I didn't get to, so I will, even though it's irrelevant in some sense. But one of the things I loved about that Alaska trip was when we're on that boat, we had a seafood option every night. And I love seafood. I could live off of it. And we went to some outdoor like salmon bakes where they literally had like endless grills set up with tons of salmon and seafood. And I mean, the food was probably the best run of food I've ever eaten. It was every night I opted for some form of seafood, and it was fresh. All like local, fresh, and native. It was the best. So, I mean, it was a blast. That trip was definitely one of the highlights of my experiences traveling anywhere.
I went to a buffet probably 20 miles south of Bangkok in Thailand. and it was run by the Thai military. And you're sitting there, and it's this huge buffet. There's like 500 people there, and this buffet has to be a good 300 feet long. And as I'm sitting there and I'm getting the stuff, and I'm asking my friend, how fresh is this? And he points like this, and I look over, and you could literally see a row of boats that are coming up and dropping off fresh caught fish, and they're literally preparing them and putting them right out on the buffet for us. And
Awesome.
Wow.
I'm an absolute. My wife and I absolutely love seafood. Now I love oysters in any form I can get them. The wife, she won't have nothing to do with them, but I love crustaceans. I love all that stuff. And if I get, that's why we love Florida. We love all the coastal states because you get great seafood. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That kind of stuff is it's amazing to me. Yeah, so I definitely, that's my kind of world. Chad, you got anything for us before we head out?
Oh, I just wanted to say I had a great time. I love these car
Excellent.
talks, so I'm always looking forward to the next one.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, just hang out, guys. I'll go ahead and close us out, and then we'll shut this down and have a little talk after we're done here. So, folks, as always, thank you so very much for joining us. And I know your time is valuable, and for you to share it with us is, to me, that's always an honor to have you spend your time with me. As always, life is short. We get one shot. Make it count.